there, my name is Caitlin Bandy and this is my channel Bandy's Books, and today we are here to talk TBR. Guys, I cannot believe we are talking about the first TBR of 2025. I don't know what happened to 2024. It went so fast. I am really excited about the start of this new year. I'm not necessarily somebody that's like, oh, new year, new me, gotta do everything fresh. But since 2024 was such a transitional year for me, I feel like 2025 is kind of a start of a fresh chapter. And so with that, I feel like a lot of pressure is on me to pick out a really good TBR for myself. I kind of feel like it's gonna set the tone for the rest of my reading year. So we're gonna talk books in a second, but before we do, I just wanted to first of all wish each and every one of you a happy 2025. I hope that your 2025 is full of amazing books, incredible friends, and exciting adventures. Mine is looking to be that way, and I hope yours is too. And then of course, Miss Luna over here wants to wish you a happy 2025 as well. If you're new to the channel, you may hear some snorts and snuffles in the background. That's this little one here. But with such a cute face, how could you be mad at it? So before we jump into the book discussion, I just want to talk to you a little bit about my channel in 2025, some of my goals, my reading, things like that. My goals this year are real simple. My goal is to try to be more consistent. I think that in years past, I have always shot myself in the foot because I get really excited, and in some months I feel really energetic or I have extra time and I post a bazillion videos, and then there's months where I'm dragging and I maybe get up 1 or 2 videos, and I don't like doing that. I want to focus on just being more consistent. So going forward, my goal will be to post at least 2 videos a month, but hopefully as a stretch goal, hitting a video per week. Of course, if I have extra videos and extra time, I'm gonna throw those videos up still, but I wanna make sure that consistently I'm getting up 2 to 4 videos a month. So that way you know what to expect from me. A goal that I wanna carry forward from 2024 is to read more nonfiction. In 2024, I wanna say I read about 20% nonfiction, which is a huge improvement from years prior. And in 2025, I wanna stretch myself a little bit further and aim for 25% nonfiction. I participated in the BookTube prize for the very first time in 2024. And a couple of the rounds I was a judge for the nonfiction genre, which really helped me read so many fantastic nonfiction books. Because I had such a good time with the nonfiction last year, I just want to really amp it up again this year. And so like I said, I'm going to be trying to hit 25% of my books read out of the nonfiction genre. Additionally, I am going to be trying to make sure I get to at least 1 book a month in Spanish. I have an entire bookshelf of Spanish reads, and I do not always do the best at prioritizing those just because they take a little more brain power for me to read in Spanish. I am fluent, but it is my second language, and so it doesn't always come naturally. But this is part of the journey of expanding fluency, is getting more comfortable with language from different countries and learning different colloquialisms and different ways to say things. And so I want to continue to do that. I think I did okay with this in 2024, but I definitely want to step it up just a little bit further, and I think I could stretch myself a little bit more in getting 2 more Spanish books. And my last goal for my reading in 2025 is just to be a little bit more intentional. Every year at the end of the year, I break down my total books read and look at how well I've accomplished my goal of reading diversely. I look to see if there are any gaps or areas that I could do better at, and then I try to change those things in the following year. So one of the gaps that I identified specifically in 2024 is that I have not done a good job of reading books by the disabled community. I have read a few books by neurodivergent authors or with neurodivergent characters, but I definitely could do a lot better at reading books with disabled characters or by disabled authors. And so that is a specific goal that I'm going to be targeting. But overall, I'm pretty happy with my reading for 2024, and I just want to continue to make that a focus in 2025, continue to do better and read more broadly. All right, so with all of the talk of goals and New Year's out of the way, let's finally get into the books. So my TBR selection for January 2025. I like to start my year in 2025 with kind of a free month. So instead of focusing on a specific genre or theme, I just focus on reading the books that I'm most excited about. I feel like January kind of sets the tone for my reading for the rest of the year. And so I just want to read books that I'm enjoying, books that I think are going to be really good, books that I just really want to dive into, and then carry that excitement forward. That said, I have about 20 physical books picked out, and then my Netgalley shelf is still a little bit out of control. So I'm going to be picking 10 books off of my Netgalley shelf to catch up on as well. So we're going to start by talking about the Netgalley books first. I have my shelf open on my phone and I'm going to read to you which ones I'm hoping to target. I have many more books than the ones that I'm specifically mentioning. These are just the 10 that I would like to highlight for this month. So the first of the Netgalley books that I would like to get to is Immaculate Forms: Uncovering the History of Women's Bodies by Helen King. Throughout history, religious scholars, medical men, and occasionally women themselves have molded thought on what makes a woman. She has been called the weaker sex, the fairer sex, the purer sex, among many other monikers. Often she has been defined simply as not a man. Today we are more aware than ever of the complex relationship between our bodies and our identities, but contrary to what some may believe, what makes a woman is a question that has always been open-ended. Immaculate Forms examines all the ways in which medicine and religion have played a gatekeeping role over women's organs. I think that this is a topic that I'm particularly interested in reading because I've been going through some health issues over the last year, most of them related to my reproductive organs. And it's been really interesting, all of the misconceptions I've run into, all of the problematic thoughts that I've received from doctors and medical professionals, just the lack of education in general about women's reproductive health. And so I've really taken to reading and studying and learning about this particular subject matter. This, I think, is going to go into the historical aspect of it, not just like modern society and how doctors view women's health now, but how it's been historically viewed. And I think that that's really interesting and an area I could do a lot of learning on. After that, I have Before the Mango Ripens by Afabwaje Kurian. In Rabada, everyone has secrets, especially since the arrival of the white American missionaries. 20-year-old Jumai is a beautiful and unassuming house girl whose dreams of escaping her home life are disrupted when an unexpected pregnancy forces her to hide her lover's identity. Tabea, an ambitious Dublin-educated doctor, has left prestigious opportunities abroad to return to the small town of her birth and discovers a painful betrayal when she strives to take control of the mission clinic. Zanya is a young translator, enticed by promise of progress, who comes to Rabada to escape a bitter past and finds himself embroiled in a fight against the American reverend for the heart of the church in town. United by their yearning for change, all three must make difficult decisions that threaten the fragile relationships of the Rabada they know. As tensions mount and hypocrisies are unveiled, the people of Rabada are faced with a question that will transform their town. Let the Americans stay or make them go. Set against the backdrop of 1970s Nigeria, teetering between post-colonial dependency and self-rule. I wanted to select this particular book because I really enjoy African literature. I've read a ton of books from Nigeria, but not too many that are set in this particular time period of the 1970s. And this is a debut novel, so I'm really excited to see what this author brings to the table. This sounds like something that's right up my alley, so I'm very excited to get into this. After that, I have Adrift in Currents, Clean and Clear by Shannon McGuire. This is the next installation of the Wayward Children series. I have been reading this series from the very first book. It is a series that I really enjoy. They're like little novellas, usually around 150 pages each, and they revolve around a world where magical doors appear to children who basically need to escape from the world that they're in. And most of these children in this particular series have returned to the regular world and are searching for their door to get back to this fantasy world, or are haunted by their experiences. It's an enjoyable series, and so I'm just looking forward to getting into this next book. After that, I have White Mulberry by Rosa, Kwan, Easton. This is a rich, deeply moving portrait of a young Korean woman in 1930s Japan who is torn between two worlds and must reclaim her true identity to provide a future for her family. 1928, Japan occupied Korea. 11-year-old Mi-young has dreams too big for her tiny farming village, near to becoming a teacher, to avoid an arranged marriage, to write her own future. When she is offered the chance to live with her older sister in Japan and continue her education, she is elated, even though it means leaving her sick mother and her very name behind. In Kyoto, anti-Korean sentiment is rising every day, and Mi-young quickly realizes she must pass as Japanese if she expects to survive. Her Japanese name, Miyoko, helps her find a new calling as a nurse, but as the years go by, she fears that her true self is slipping away. She seeks solace in a Korean church group, and within it, finds a romance with an activist that reignites her sense of purpose and gives her a cherished son. As war looms on a new front and Mi-young feels the constraints of her adopted home titan, she is faced with a choice that will change her life and the lives of those that she loves forever. I'm interested in reading this book because this is such an interesting time period. There's so much history occurring around the world, and in particular this relationship between Korea and Japan at the time. There's just so much to write about. I've read books like Pachinko, Beasts of a Little Land, Island of Sea Women, all of them to do with the Japanese occupation of Korea. And this is set in that same time period, but it's with a young woman of Korean descent choosing to move to Japan and to try to pass as Japanese to survive there. I think that this will be a really interesting book to read. After that, I have Untethered by Angela Jackson-Browne. In a small college town of Troy, Alabama, amidst the backdrop of 1967, Katia Daniels lives a life steeped in responsibility. At the Pike County Group Home for Boys, she pours her heart into nurturing the young lives under her care, harboring a longing for children of her own. Katia's romantic entanglement with an older man brings comfort, but also stirs questions about the path that she's chosen. The weight of her family's history bears down on her. A twin brother is missing in action in the heart of the Vietnam War. Having lost her father to cancer, Katia took up the mantle of caretaker, ensuring her mother and brothers were looked after. Her sense of duty extends to the boys at the group home, creating a web of obligations that stretches her emotional bandwidth. When Seth Tolbert, a familiar face from her high school days, re-enters Katia's life, he brings with him a breeze of nostalgia and a reminder of a time when her dreams felt less tethered. As their friendship rekindles, Katia grapples with the idea of making choices for herself, even as the ticking of her biological clock grows louder. I'm really excited about reading this one because I have previously read Jackson-Browne's Homeward and I enjoyed it. I thought that she did a really good job of picking a specific tiny little part of historical fiction and really focusing in on it, bringing some attention to an area that people might not really know about. This one seems like it might be a little bit more romance focused, which makes me slightly skeptical, but I think that Jackson-Browne is a pretty solid writer and I so far really enjoy the way that she tackles historical fiction, so I'm looking forward to getting into this one. After that, I have Kingdom of No Tomorrow by Fabienne Josaphat. This is set in 1968 and Nettie Ballou, a young Haitian student in Oakland, gets caught up in the ongoing revolutionary fever. With her friend Clea Brown, she uses her public health skills to help operate the free health clinic created by the people she believes are true revolutionaries, the Black Panthers. When she falls in love with Black Panther Party defense captain Melvin Mosley, their passionate love affair soon eclipses all else, her friendship with Clea, and even her own sense of self. Pregnant, Nettie follows Melvin to Chicago to help with a newly launched Illinois chapter of the Panthers. But once there, she finds Chicago segregated, police surveillance brutal, and her faith in love eroding as Melvin becomes unfaithful. After a violent tussle with the police and the loss of their unborn child, both Nettie and Melvin are caught in the viciousness of J. Edgar Hoover's covert campaigns, and Nettie is soon on the run, desperate to find power in her roots and ultimately to save herself. I'm really excited about this book. I like that this is set in the 1960s. I like that it's going to talk not only about the struggle for civil rights, but also how women get left behind in that struggle often. I like that this character has a Haitian background and is going to be looking at this from a unique lens. There's a lot to love about this book and I'm really excited to delve into it. Then I have Curdle Creek by Yvonne Battle-Felton. Osira, a 45-year-old widow, is an obedient follower of the strict conventions of Curdle Creek, an all-black town in rural America stuck in the past and governed by a tradition of ominous rituals. Osira is considered blessed, but her luck changes when her children flee. She comes second to last in the running of the widows, and her father flees when his name is called in the annual moving on ceremony. Forced into a test of allegiance, Osira finds herself transported back in time, then into another realm, where she must answer for crimes committed by Curdle Creek. Exile forces her to jump realms again, landing Osira even farther away from home in rural England. Safe as long as she sticks to the rules, she quickly learns that there are consequences for every kindness. Each jump could lead Osira anywhere but back home. So this sounds really interesting. I love a good kind of horror dystopian sort of a book, and this is got those kind of elements. This is said to be for fans of The Lottery and The Hunger Games, so I feel like this is going to be right up my alley. The next book that I want to catch up on is The City in Glass by Nghi. A demon, an angel, a city that burns at the heart of the world. The demon Vitrine, immortal, powerful, and capricious, loves the dazzling city of Azrael. She has mothered, married, and maddened the city and its people for generations, and built it into a place of joy and desire, revelry and riot. And then the angels come and the city falls. Vitrine is left with nothing but memories, and a book containing the names of those she has lost. And an angel, now bound by her mad, grief-stricken curse to haunt the city that he burned. She mourns her dead and rages against the angel she longs to destroy. Made to be each other's devastation, angel and demon are destined for eternal battle. Instead, they find themselves locked in a devouring fascination that will change them both forever. Together, they unearth the past of the lost city and begin to shape its future. But when war threatens Azrael and everything they have built, Vitrine and her angel must decide whether they will let the city fall again. This is a book that I'm really excited about because I have really enjoyed Nghi's kind of fantasy horror type of writing. I haven't loved every single book that they've written, but I have enjoyed quite a few of them, and this sounds like right up the alley of what I have enjoyed with their writing. So I'm really looking forward to getting into it. After that, I'm excited to read The Deaf Girl, a memoir of hearing loss, hope, and fighting against the odds by Abigail Heringer. The Bachelor's first deaf contestant, Abigail Heringer, made her television debut as an instant fan favorite on season 25 of The Bachelor. Stepping out of the limousine, she approached her bachelor playfully, staring at his lips all night for two compelling reasons: her profound deafness since birth and because he had some nice lips. But Abigail's journey wasn't always marked by such confidence. Growing up deaf and introverted, she dreaded being the center of attention, fearing her disability would burden those around her. Among her hearing peers, she felt like an outsider, simply labeled as the deaf girl. And after receiving a cochlear implant at the age of 2, she subsequently struggled to find her place in the deaf community too. Caught in between two worlds and grappling to define her identity as a deaf woman, Abigail felt like she belonged in neither. Supported by her family, particularly her deaf older sister Rachel, Abigail has come to understand that while being deaf is part of her identity, it doesn't define her. Throughout her journey, marked by challenges and adversity, Abigail has grown into her own strongest advocate, discovering a new voice that is confident, fearless, and empowered. A voice that enables her to proudly reclaim the title of the deaf girl that she once resisted and rewrite it as a testament to her resilience and strength. So I'm excited about this book because I don't actually know who this person is. I've never really watched The Bachelor, and I don't know anything about that show really, but I do love a story of coming to terms with one's own identity, learning to be strong and secure about the things that you used to feel insecure about. And I really like that this person went all the way from being this shy, insecure child who felt like she didn't fit into being a contestant on a reality show on primetime television. I'm really interested in her story. The next book that I am picking off of my Netgalley shelf is A Measure of Intelligence, One Mother's Reckoning with the IQ Test by Pepper Stetler and Elizabeth Gassman. When Pepper Stetler was told that her daughter Louisa, who has Down syndrome, would be regularly required to take IQ tests to secure support in school, she asked a simple why. In questioning the authority and the relevance of the test, Stetler set herself on a winding, often dark investigation into how the IQ test came to be the irrefutable standard of measuring intelligence. The unsettling history causes Stetler to wonder what influence this test will have over her own daughter's future, and if its genesis is so mired in eugenics, whether Louisa should be taking it at all. So what are we measuring when we try to measure intelligence? As she uncovers the history of IQ, exposing its roots in eugenics, racism, xenophobia, and ableism, Stetler realizes that the desire to quantify intelligence is closely tied to a desire to segregate society. She traces its legacy from inception to the present day, where schools and society have adopted the IQ as shorthand for an individual's aptitude. Boldly, Stetler questions how this rigid definition of intelligence has influenced who society holds up as successful, and perhaps more importantly, what it is that we miss when we judge someone solely on their measured intelligence. Blending a mother's love and dedication to her daughter with incisive historical and cultural analysis, A Measure of Intelligence investigates the origins and influence of the IQ test on our modern education system, questions how we define and judge intelligence, challenges its flawed foundation, and argues for a fundamental reevaluation of how we understand an individual's perceived potential. I am really interested in this book. This is a subject that I know very little about. I know obviously that IQ is held up as a gold standard, often used to value or devalue people, but the history of it in terms of eugenics and racism, while I could probably guess at it, I don't know like the concrete history of it. And so I'm really interested in learning more about this. And I'm also really interested in learning about how this affected her child specifically, and how IQ tests are used towards the disabled community. I didn't know that disabled people were forced to regularly take IQ tests, and I find that concept in and of itself pretty horrifying. But I also am really interested in what this mother uncovered in this journey to advocate for her own child, and if anything has changed since she's written this book. It just seems like there's going to be a lot to learn from this. And finally, from my Netgalley list, I'll be looking forward to reading The Indian Card, Who Gets to Be Native in America by Carrie Shoots Peltz. This has been on my TBR for the last couple of months, and I just haven't gotten around to it, but this sounds really, really interesting. It's a groundbreaking exploration of Native American identity, tribal enrollment, ancestry, and what all of this reveals about our understanding of race and politics. The number of people in the United States who self-identify as Native has exploded in the last 2 decades. In the 2020 census, more than twice as many people checked the box for American Indian or Alaska Native than in 2000. Sure, there have been improvements to ways that we are able to identify race in this once-in-a-decade survey, and there have been efforts to reduce the undercount of people living on reservations. But it's clear that some people are lying, some people are wrong, and many are caught in a growing chasm between self-identity and verification. The concept of having evidence to determine your tribal identity through measurable objective means is somewhat unique to Native Americans who, unlike any other racial or ethnic group in the United States, undergo bureaucratic processes to prove themselves. Every tribe is different. Some trace lineage, others consult historic rolls, and some calculate blood quantum. Having a card to confirm your tribal enrollment is not synonymous with being Native, and yet it offers a way to validate something intangible. In the Indian card, Carrie Schupeltz dives deep into the idiosyncrasy and the often violent history of the ways that Native people establish an identity that is cultural, racial, and political all at once. How do blood, land, money, integrity, and tradition define tribal citizenship? How is kinship determined before colonization? And what would it look like to define the community for ourselves? This is a book that I'm really excited to get to. It was on my TBR in November and December. Unfortunately, in December, my reading was really slow, and so I did not make it to this particular book, but I am really fascinated by this subject. I think oftentimes when it comes to Native identity, people tend to self-identify, and oftentimes incorrectly. So I'm curious about this discussion of like blood quantum and how people prove identity versus how they self-identify. I don't know a whole ton about like Native tribal enrollment and blood quantums and things like that. So I think this will be a good opportunity for me to learn a whole bunch more. And now we're going to get to the books on my physical TBR. I have about 20-ish of them or so, and these are all just books that I'm really excited to read, books that I've picked up on recent hauls that are just new and shiny and I want to get to. So first up, I have No Longer Human by Osamu Dazai. This is about a character who portrays himself as a failure. The protagonist of Osamu Dazai's No Longer Human narrates a seemingly normal life, even while he feels himself incapable of understanding human beings. Dazai is considered a classic Japanese author. This is translated fiction. Dazai did pass away in 1948, and I think this interrogates a lot of his own feelings about himself. I've heard really good reviews of this, but I've also heard that this is like one of those really tragic, miserable books. In fact, I came across this particular book when I was researching for Misery May, and it's been on my list ever since. And then I found a copy in June when I did this massive like book crawl around San Diego to a bunch of indie bookstores. And then I have Revenge of the Scapegoat by Caren Belin. One day, Iris, an adjunct at a city arts college, receives a terrible package, recently unearthed letters that her father wrote to her in her teens, in which he blames her for their family's crises. Driven by the raw fact of receiving these devastating letters, not once but twice in a lifetime, and in the panic of chronic pain brought on by rheumatoid arthritis, Iris escapes the countryside, or some absurdist version of it. Nazi cows, Picasso's used as tampons, and a pair of arthritic feet that speak in the voices of Flaubert's Bouvard and Pécuchet are standard fare in this beguiling novel of odd characters, surprising circumstances, and intuitive leaps, all brought together in profoundly serious ways. This was a book that I picked up on a road trip to Pasadena with my mom. We went to a handful of bookstores there, and in one particular bookstore, I had a great discussion with one of the booksellers, and he recommended a handful of books for me, and this was one of the ones. This is from thedorothyproject.com. And I am really excited about checking this out. I feel like this is not something I would have come across on my own. And then a recommendation from that same bookseller in Pasadena. I have Autobiography of Red by Anne Carson. So this is a retelling of the story of Heracles from the perspective of Geryon as a young boy. So he's a winged red monster, and he reveals the volcanic terrain of his fragile, tormented soul in an autobiography that he begins at the age of 5. This author is actually a poet, and so this is written in verse. The person recommending it said that this was very different from anything else that they'd read, that it was very unique and interesting. I'm not super into verse and poetry typically, but this is really short. It's only like 150 pages, and it does have a narrative structure, so I'm really interested in that. And then I have a book that's been on my shelf for a little bit. It was recommended to me in San Diego at the Book Catapult, and that is The Unseen by Roy Jacobson. This is translated from the Norwegian by Don Bartlett and Don Shaw. Born on the island that bears her name, Ingrid Baroy's world is circumscribed by storm-scoured rocks and the moods of the sea by which her family lives and dies. But her father dreams of building a quay that will end their isolation, and her mother longs for the island of her youth. And the country faces its own sea change, the advent of a modern world, and all its unpredictability and violence. This sounds really interesting. Norwegian literature tends to be kind of hit and miss for me, so I'll be really interested to see how this works out for me. This was shortlisted in 2017 for the Man Booker Prize. I have got kind of hit and miss luck with Booker Prize books. I haven't read as many of the international bookers, so we'll see how this goes. I also am kind of hit and miss with Norwegian literature. I did read a Norwegian translation, actually 2 of them in 2024, and both of them were kind of mid-range books for me. So hopefully this one will be a little bit more enjoyable. After that, I picked up Goliath by Tochi Onyebuchi. So Onyebuchi is an author that I read for the first time 2 years ago, thanks to BookTube. And I really enjoyed their book, Riot Baby, and it has made me want to read more of their work. So I came across this particular book here in Las Vegas at one of my favorite bookshops. It's called the Analog Dope Store, and it's just this really cute little bookshop focused on Black literature. And they had this there, and I was like, oh, I love Onyebuchi's writing. Let me try this one out. So in the 2050s, Earth has begun to empty. Those with the means and the privilege have departed the great cities of the United States for the more comfortable confines of space colonies. Those left behind salvage what they can from the collapsing infrastructure. As they eke out an existence, their neighborhoods are being cannibalized. Brick by brick, their houses are sent to the colonies. What was once a home, now a quaint reminder for the colonists of the world that they wrecked. This sounds really interesting to me. Onyebuchi seems to really like to interrogate like deep and relevant themes. I think this is going to talk a lot about class and privilege. Also, maybe going to delve into gentrification. I think this is going to be a fantastic book. I'm here for this. Then I have 2 books that I'm a little bit skeptical about just because I've heard really mixed reviews about these particular authors. First up, I have Earthlings by Sayaka Murata. This says, Natsuki is a young girl who feels like she's been dropped into her family from an alien planet. Her best friend is a plush toy hedgehog named Paiute, and her only human friend is her cousin Yu. Natsuki and Yu spend their summers in the wild mountains of Nagano, dreaming of other worlds. When a terrible sequence of events threatens to part the children forever, they make a promise, survive no matter what. Now Natsuki is grown, living a quiet life with her asexual husband, but dark shadows and societal pressure are pursuing her. Fleeing the suburbs for the mountains of her childhood, Natsuki prepares herself for a reunion with Yu. Will she still remember their promise, and will he help her keep it? Dreamlike and wonderful, Earthlings cement Murata's standing as a master chronicler of our own uncanny universe. So I've heard really mixed reviews about this. I know that this book is really dark. I have tried to avoid any spoilers, but I am aware that the content towards the end of this book gets pretty rough. I also have heard a lot of mixed reviews. Some people seem to love this and some people seem to hate this. I have never read Convenience Store Women. I have never read Murata at all. I know very little about this aside from it being dark and kind of eccentric. So we'll see how this goes. And then the other one that I'm a little skeptical about is 1Q84 by Haruki Murakami. This is described as a love story, a mystery, a fantasy, a novel of self-discovery, a dystopia to rival George Orwell's. 1Q84 is a tremendous feat of imagination from one of our most revered contemporary writers. And that is all that it says on the back of this book. The reason that I'm a little bit hesitant about this is just because Murakami has this kind of a reputation of being like a lit bro writer, really highbrow, and not the best portrayer of female characters. So we will see. I'm not sure if I'll get along with this or not. I'm gonna give it a fair shot. I'm not going in with any like preconceived notions of it. I have never read Murakami before, and I've not heard a ton of reviews of his work just because I feel like the channels that I watch don't cross over with Murakami's writing all that often. But this one sounds interesting to me. I like that it's compared to George Orwell's 1984, and I like dystopian, Big Brother, you know, kind of state situations. So hopefully I will enjoy this. Then I have Ghost Season by Fatin Abbas. This says, a dynamic, beautifully orchestrated debut novel connecting 5 characters caught in the crosshairs of conflict on the Sudanese border. A mysterious burnt corpse appears one morning in Saraya, a remote border town between northern and southern Sudan. For 5 strangers on an NGO compound, the discovery foreshadows trouble to come. South Sudanese translator William connects the corpse to the sudden disappearance of cook Layla, a northern nomad with whom he's fallen in love. Meanwhile, Sudanese-American filmmaker Dena struggles to connect to her unfamiliar homeland, and white Midwestern aid worker Alex finds his plans thwarted by a changing climate and looming civil war. Dancing between the adults is Mustafa, a clever, endearing 12-year-old whose schemes to rise out of poverty set off cataclysmic events on the compound. This sounds really interesting. I have not read a ton of books set in Sudan, dealing with the Sudanese conflict that are not nonfiction. I've read several nonfiction books about Sudan, but this will probably be the first time that I've read like a historical fiction that deals with that particular conflict. I like that this has 5 different characters, 5 different perspectives, and I'm really looking forward to getting into this. I believe I got this at the Lost Bookshop in Los Angeles on this recent trip to Pasadena, and I'm very excited about getting into it. And then I have Ada's Room by Sharon Dodua Otua. This was translated by John Cho Polizzi. And this was a book that I recently picked up here in Las Vegas at the Writer's Block on my Black Friday shopping trip with my mom. A woman in 15th century West Africa named Ada buries her child and confronts a Portuguese enslaver. A woman in Victorian England named Ada Lovelace, a mathematical genius and computer programming pioneer, tries to hide her affair with Charles Dickens from her husband. A woman named Ada, imprisoned in a concentration camp at Middelbow Dora in 1945, will survive one more day in enforced prostitution. Connected by an unknown but sentient spirit and a bracelet of fertility beads that each Ada encounters at a pivotal moment in her life, these women share a name and a purpose. As their interwoven narratives converge on a modern-day Ada, a young Ghanaian woman who finds herself pregnant and alone in Berlin, searching for a home before the baby arrives, their shared spirit will find a way to help her break the vicious cycle of injustice. This is not an author that I'm familiar with, nor a book that I had heard of before, but I found this in the Writer's Block and thought it sounded really interesting. I love these types of books that weave the storylines of like different characters together. This looks like it's going to cover a lot of different time periods and places, and I'm really excited about checking this out. After that, I have Bomb Shelter, Love, Time, and Other Explosives by Mary Laura Philpott. So as a daughter, mother, and friend, Mary Laura Philpott considers herself an anxious optimist, a natural warrior with a stubborn sense of good cheer. And while she didn't really think she had any sort of magical protective powers, she believed in her heart that as long as she loved her people enough, she could keep them safe. Then in the early hours of one dark morning at home, her belief was upended. In the months that followed, she turned to poignant memories, priceless stories, and a medley of coping mechanisms with comically mixed success to regain her equilibrium and find meaning in everyday wonders. This is another book that I found at the Writer's Block here in Las Vegas during my Black Friday shopping trip. I love a good memoir, especially one that explores emotions and like how people move forward. I think that this could be a very interesting read. Then I have Starter Villain by John Scalzi. This was a book that was recommended to me by my mom's friend Kathy. She's an avid reader as well, and she just said that this was so quirky and interesting. Charlie's life is going nowhere fast. A divorced substitute teacher living with his cat. All he wants is to open a pub downtown, if only the bank will approve his loan. Then his long-lost uncle Jake dies and leaves his supervillain business, complete with island volcano lair, to Charlie. But becoming a supervillain isn't all giant laser death rays and lava pits. Jake had enemies, and now they're coming after Charlie. His uncle might have been a stand-up, old-fashioned kind of villain, but there are the real things. Rich, soulless predators backed by multinational corporations and venture capital. It's up to Charlie to win the war his uncle started against a league of supervillains, but with unionized dolphins, hyper-intelligent talking spy cats, and a terrifying henchperson at his side, going bad is starting to look pretty good. In a dog-eat-dog world, be a cat. I don't know what to think about this. I love quirky, eccentric books when they're done really well. I have heard good things about Scalzi's writing. I know Kaiju Preservation Society was really well received and well loved, so I'm hoping that this will be a hit for me. And then I have River Spirit by Leila Abu Leila. This was a book that I picked up on my epic adventure across the Southwest with my mom. We found this in Phoenix at Changing Hands bookstore. This enchanting and eye-opening new novel from Caine Prize winner Leila Abu Leila follows an embattled young woman coming of age during the hottest war in 19th century Sudan, and illuminates the tensions that shape her course between Britain and Sudan, Christianity and Islam, colonizer and colonized. In River Spirit, Abu Leila gives us the unforgettable story of a people who, against the odds and for a brief time, gained independence from foreign rule through their willpower, subterfuge, and sacrifice. So this book sounds fantastic, and I'm excited that this is a second fiction book about Sudan. I know that when I was discussing Ghost Season, I mentioned that I had never read a fictional narrative about Sudan before, and that this might be the first. So excited that there's actually 2 on my TBR this month. Excited to expand my reading to different countries. Then I have Bird Milk and Mosquito Bones by Priyanka Mattu. I picked this up on this epic book crawl that I did across San Diego in June for my birthday. Hopefully I'll get the video of that up soon because I don't want you to miss it. It was like 9 bookstores and so many amazing books. Priyanka Mattu was born in a wooden house in the Himalayas, as were most of her ancestors. In 1989, however, mounting violence in the region forced Mattu's community to flee. The home into which her family poured their dreams was reduced to a pile of rubble. Mattu never moved back to her beloved Kashmir because it no longer existed. She and her family just kept packing and unpacking and moving on. In 40 years, Mattu accumulated 32 different addresses, and she chronicles her nomadic existence with wit, wisdom, and an inimitable eye for light with the darkest moments. She takes us from her grandparents' sprawling home in Srinagar, where her boisterous aunties raced through the halls, to Saudi Arabia, where friendships were gained and lost behind the sandstone walls of a foreigner's compound. We witness her courtship with a nice Jewish boy, now her husband, and her efforts to replicate her mother's Rogan Josh recipe via Zoom. And we are with her as she settles into her unlikely new homeland, Los Angeles, where she sets off on what is perhaps her most meaningful journey, that of becoming a writer. So this sounds fantastic to me. I was immediately captivated by this cover. I think it's so stark and so pretty. And the description of this sounds fantastic. I love a good memoir As I mentioned, I'm trying to read more nonfiction this year, so that will count towards that goal. After that, I have A Girl is a Body of Water by Jennifer Mansubuga Makumbi. This was another book that I picked up in New Mexico at Big Star Books specifically. That was such a great road trip. I picked up so many fantastic reads. In her 13th year, Kirabo confronts a piercing question that has haunted her childhood. Who is my mother? Kirabo has been raised by women in the small Ugandan village of Nateta. Her grandmother, her best friend, and her many aunts, but the absence of her mother follows her like a shadow. Complicating these feelings of abandonment as Kirabo comes of age, she feels the emergence of a mysterious second self, a headstrong and confusing force inside her, at odds with her sweet and obedient nature. Seeking answers, Kirabo begins spending afternoons with Nasuta, the local witch, trading stories and learning not only about this force inside her, but about the woman who birthed her, who she learns is alive but not ready to meet. Nasuta also explains that Kirabo has a streak of the first woman, an independent, original state that has been all but lost to women. Kirabo's journey to reconcile her rebellious origins, alongside her desire to reconnect with her mother and to honor her family's expectations, is rich in the folklore of Uganda and an arresting exploration of what it means to be a modern girl in a world that seems determined to silence women. This sounds fantastic. I haven't read too much Ugandan literature, so I'm also excited about this. I love books that kind of interrogate women's roles in society and how that conflict of like modern roles and cultural traditions exists. I think this is going to be a really good read. After that, I have The Devil Behind the Badge, The Horrifying 12 Days of the Border Patrol Serial Killer by Rick Gervais. This is another book that I picked up at the Analog Dope store here in Las Vegas on my Black Friday shopping trip. Melissa Ramirez, Claudine Ann Luera, Giselda Alicia Cantu, and Yanel Ortiz were four marginalized women striving to make ends meet as sex workers in the border town of Laredo, Texas. They looked out for one another, but they would soon share a connection that none of them could have imagined. When Melissa was found dead, the other three women were on the edge but assumed they were safe. 12 days later, they too were dead, and police had detained an unlikely suspect. Juan David Ortiz, a 10-year veteran of U.S. Customs and Border Protections, where he carried a badge and a service revolver and was entrusted to protect the community in which he eventually killed. From September 3rd through September 15th, 2018, Ortiz, a husband and father to 3 children, lured his victims into his white Dodge truck and drove them to the outskirts of town, where he executed them, leaving them dead or dying on the sides of dark rural roads. In this fast-paced book, Pulitzer Prize-winning USA Today journalist Rick Gervais tells the gripping story of the 4 murders that shook Laredo and the quest to unmask a cold, calculated killer who was hiding in plain sight. I'm really interested in this particular book because I grew up right on the border in San Diego. I have a very complicated relationship myself with Border Patrol. I have personally witnessed several abuses of power by Border Patrol and experienced some very questionable things at the hands of Border Patrol that make you really wonder if there's not more broad-scale abuses of powers occurring. Clearly, in this case, you had a man who was out serial killing and used his authority to shield himself, and it allowed him to kill more people. I think this is going to be brutal and really sad, but I also think it's really important to remember these victims and remember how this person got away with this and how he abused his power so we can prevent that from happening in the future. So I know that this is going to be a tough read, but also I think it's an important one. Then I've got The 13th Child by Erin A. Craig. This is a book that I recently picked up from Book of the Month, not one that I was familiar with, but one that sounds really interesting. Hazel Trepas has always known she wasn't like her siblings, a 13th child promised to one of the gods. She spends her childhood waiting for her benefactor, Merrick, the god of death, to arrive and take her away. When he does, he lays out exactly what he's planned for Hazel's future. She will become a great and celebrated healer. To aid her endeavors, Merrick blesses Hazel with a gift, the ability to instantly deduce the exact cure needed to treat the sick. But all gifts come with a price. Hazel can see when death has claimed a patient and is tasked with ending their suffering. Haunted by the ghosts of those she's killed, Hazel longs to run, but destiny brings her to the royal court, where she meets Leopold, a rakish prince with a disdain for everyone and everything. And that's where Hazel faces her biggest dilemma yet. Should she save the life of a king marked to die? Hazel knows what she is meant to do and what her heart is urging her toward. But what will happen if she goes against the will of death himself? I feel like this is gonna have some romance subplots, but I do enjoy good fantasy. I like the concept of death and this person like in this conflict with her relationship with death. So hopefully this will be an enjoyable read. It's kind of a chunker of a book. And then I have an ARC that was sent to me a while back and I've been meaning to catch up on. This is Dissonance, and it's by Aaron Ryan. They came one day and just hovered in the sky. 3 months later, 85% of humanity was dead. Andrew Shipley was just like the rest of humanity, going about his business and providing for his family when the aliens came. They descended down from the sky silently on June 6, 2026, hovering at a gestationary orbit over our planet for 3 months. No one knew what they wanted nor why they were there. Then on September 3rd, they suddenly activated and hunted down all of mankind. No one knew what to do and no one could fight back. The aliens had a terrifying ability to paralyze us where we stood, consuming us at their leisure. Soon all of humanity would learn the #1 rule as it pertains to Gorgons. You just don't look. Pandemonium ensues and chaos erupts as Andrew races against both time and hope in order to get his family to safety from a terrifying species that has invaded Earth for its own nefarious purposes. So this is actually the prequel to the whole Dissonance trilogy, and I'm kind of excited to start with the prequel and see how I like this and if I want to delve further into the series. I do love a good alien story, and this sounds like it could be really interesting. I can't imagine what would happen if 85% of the world population was wiped out in a day. From there, I have Big Time by Ben H. Winters. This was a book that I picked up on my road trip across the Southwest. I picked this up at the Poison Pen, and it was universally recommended by every single one of their staff members, like on the staff selection wall. This is also a signed copy, which I didn't know at the time. What if time could be taken from us? The minutes, the hours, the years of our lives, extracted like organs, taken for transplant. What would it mean for the world, and what would it do to the person from who it's taken? Grace Burney is a mid-level bureaucrat in the Food and Drug Administration, a woman who once brimmed with purpose, but somehow turned into a middle-aged single mom with a dull government job and a melancholy sense that life has passed her by. Until the night, a strange photo comes across her desk of a young woman in a hospital bed who has been subjected to a mysterious procedure. Against orders and against common sense, Grace sets out to bring the girl to safety and finds herself risking her job, her future, and her life on whether she can discover the missing girl before she's captured by an obsessive and violent mercenary who's also searching for her. I'm a little hesitant about this one because it does seem like it's just going to be the standard thriller, but this was, again, unanimously recommended by every single bookseller in this particular store, so maybe it's going to surprise me. I am kind of nervous, kind of excited. We'll see how it goes. And finally, I have A Council of Dolls by Mona Susan Power. From the mid-century metropolis of Chicago to the windswept lands of the Dakota people to the brutal Indian boarding schools, A Council of Dolls is a tale of 3 extraordinary women told in part through the stories of the dolls that they carry. Follows Sissy, born in 1961. Sissy's relationship with her beautiful and volatile mother is difficult, even dangerous, but her life is also filled with lovely things, including a new Christmas present, a doll called Ethel. Ethel whispers advice and kindness in Sissy's ear, and in one especially terrifying moment, maybe even saves Sissy's life. Lillian, born 1925, raised on her tribe's reservation in a time of terrible change, Lillian clings to her sister Blanche and her doll May. When the sisters are forced to attend an Indian boarding school far from their home, Blanche refuses to be cowed by the school's abusive nuns, but when tragedy strikes the sisters, May finds her way to defend the girls. Cora, born 1888, born just after the genocidal Indian Wars, Cora still isn't afraid of the white men who take her away to be civilized. When teachers burn her beloved buckskin doll Winona, Cora discovers that the spirit of Winona may not be entirely lost. So this was a book that was on my TBR at the end of the year, and unfortunately didn't get to it, but it sounds fantastic and I really want to make sure I do get to it. So I thought I'd put it on my TBR again for this month. I'm really excited to get into this, and I love that this has these 3 different perspectives and how they link to dolls. I'm really curious about this. I've heard kind of mixed reviews. So that is the end of my TBR for the month of January 2025. Again, I can't believe it's 2025 already. Happy New Year. Wishing you all of the best. I'm so looking forward to chatting with you guys more and being a little bit more available throughout the year. I've got lots of exciting projects coming up, so hopefully you'll stick around for it. If you like the video, hit the thumbs up, comment down below, and let me know what you plan to read for 2025. Do you have any reading goals, any specific plans? What are you reading in January specifically? Have you read any of the books that I have on my TBR? Anything sound interesting? Just tell me all the things. I'm here to talk books, so talk books with me. And if you're not already subscribed to this channel, you know what to do. Hit the subscribe button down below, as well as the notification bell so that you never miss a video, and that way we can see each other again soon. Thanks so much for joining. Bye.